Good afternoon. I thought that I would like to provide a shorthand historical perspective to the Balfour Declaration, not the reasons for the issuance of that declaration by the British government in 1917, but rather about the aftermath of the Balfour Declaration. You may have noticed that the British delegation at the United Nations Security Council marked the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration by voting for a motion that condemned Israel for settlement activity in Samaria. I don't need to tell you that the Balfour Declaration committed the British government to the establishment of a Jewish national home, Palestine and the land of Israel. That is based on that, it was based on that declaration that the League of Nations mandate was issued, and the League of Nations mandate, quoting the Balfour Declaration, pronounced the commitment to the establishment of a Jewish national home in Palestine and called for close settlement on the land of Palestine, the land of Israel. Some parts of it today are called Judea and Samaria. And that is an international commitment which, to the best of my knowledge, can only be revoked with the assent or with the consent of the people to whom the commitment was issued, namely the Jewish people. So it is ironic, maybe sad, to see the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration being marked by the delegate of Britain at the United Nations voting for a condemnation of these very settlements. In a few moments, we can try to follow the trajectory of the relationship between Britain and the Zionist enterprise, because, sad to say, almost immediately after the entry of British troops into Palestine, we were witness to a continuous retreat from the commitments that Britain had undertaken to the Jewish people and to the Zionist enterprise. The military administration, which ran the country for the first 2 years, was openly anti-Semitic, openly hostile to the Zionist enterprise. The first major blow at the Zionist enterprise came from none other than Winston Churchill, the man who is considered to be, and rightly so, amongst British leaders, the most pro-Zionist, the most friendly to the Zionist enterprise. But Winston Churchill, as colonial secretary, made an agreement with the Emir Abdullah, decided to remove all of Transjordan, what is today the Kingdom of Jordan, 78% of the original territory allocated to the Jewish people as their homeland by the League of Nations, and thereafter issued what is known as the Churchill White Paper of 1922, which includes, among other things, the statement that whereas some people are talking about Palestine becoming a Jewish state, as Jewish as England is English, this is not the intention of His Majesty's government. And obviously immigration by Jews to Palestine will have to be limited by the economic absorption capacity of that country. I won't bore you with the other details along the way, all of them well known, until we come to May 1939, 22 years after the Balfour Declaration, the MacDonald White Paper, which in effect was a declaration by the government of Britain at that time headed by Neville Chamberlain, for an Arab state, not a Jewish state, an Arab state to be established in Palestine, what today we call a Palestinian state. So that is a trajectory from a commitment to establishing a Jewish state in Palestine, in effect to a declaration calling for the establishment of an Arab state in Palestine. There followed the blockade, the limitations on immigration, not allowing refugees escaping from Hitler's Europe to reach the shores of Palestine, the Struma with 786 of its passengers not allowed to proceed, from Turkey to Palestine, an obsession in the colonial office. Lord Moyne representing Britain here in Cairo, that following the Struma there would be other boats bringing refugees from Europe, and that should not be allowed to happen. The Struma, I think, really was the watershed of the relationship between Britain and the Jewish people. Until then, it was a period of cooperation, sometimes close cooperation, other times cooperation that was not that close, moving towards lack of cooperation, hostility, and even enmity. Gallows were put up here in Israel. Underground fighters were hanged. 251 underground fighters were exiled to prison camps in Africa. Britain had, in effect, moved away from its commitment to the Balfour Declaration. We might ask, why did this happen? In short, I would say a little bit of anti-Semitism and a lot of power politics. The view, which maybe is understandable, but was obviously wrong, that the Arabs possessed so much more power, so much more influence, were so much more important to Britain's interests, especially as the war approached, than was the small Jewish community here in Palestine. Turned out to be a miscalculation. The Arab contribution to the war effort in World War II was negative, not positive. The Jewish contribution, the Zionist contribution to the war effort in World War II was not insignificant, could have been substantial had Britain agreed to the request by Chaim Weizmann and Jabotinsky to establish a Jewish army at the beginning of hostilities. Could have been very significant. And again, that view, although negotiations came close to a conclusion, Fort Wingate was designated to be the commander of this Jewish army, but Britain stepped back at the last moment, again out of consideration of what the response would be in the Arab world if such a Jewish army were to be set up. We have here a former ambassador to London. People will probably know us a great deal more than I. Where do we locate this hostility to the Zionist enterprise in Britain? Of course, there are many people in Britain, very great supporters of Zionism, great supporters of the idea of the Jewish people returning to their ancient homeland. But if I were to try to locate the point from which the hostility over the years has stemmed, I think it is probably the Foreign Office. As Foreign Minister, I met with Margaret Thatcher, very friendly to Israel, very friendly to the Zionist enterprise. When I came out of her office, I said, we have a friend at number 10 Downing Street. And then I went over to the Foreign Office, and I thought I'd entered another country. I met at the United Nations a year later with John Major, who at the time was Foreign Secretary. And I think you will probably be surprised to hear this because he's known to be very friendly to Israel over the years. it was the most unpleasant meeting I had with any other foreign minister. He read a brief that he had been given evidently by his people in the Foreign Office, and it was negative, negative, negative. And I said to myself, they seem to have forgotten that Britain is not the mandatory power here anymore. Bevin probably stands out as the man most hostile as Foreign Secretary to the Zionist enterprise. And the degree of the miscalculation of the capabilities of the Yishuv and of the Zionist movement and of the Jewish people can be seen by him saying to Winston Churchill, when the fighting had started here in 1948, the Arabs are going to win. But the Arabs didn't win. Can we predict or expect a change for the better? I think of a statement made by the present Prime Minister, Theresa May, the admiration she expressed for Israel's vibrant democracy. That kind of a statement from London we've not heard in a long time, and maybe it portends a change for the better. Thank you.